going live. Okay. Hey, pussies. Welcome to the 17th video and part 2 of BDSM with me, Positive Pussy. It's BDSM part 2. Woo! Anyway, this is just a crop that I have, or I think, yeah, riding crop that I have. It's not mine. It's actually my partner's, but I'm borrowing it. So yeah, today is BDSM part 2. Last week was BDSM part 1. I had on Nick, a fellow BDSM practitioner and a dom, and a very good friend of mine. He also knocked all of my pussies down, but it was okay. The show went on, and it was really funny. I knew it was going to happen. But thank you to Nick for coming on, and thank you to everyone who watched. If you are watching live and which I don't think anyone is right now, so cool, we're chill. But you're commenting, asking questions, or responding. I just ask that everyone try and be respectful. I am a person, and if you're not being respectful, then I'm just not going to acknowledge the comments. Obviously, I can't force you to be nice to me, but I'm not going to acknowledge it if you're just trolling or being blatantly rude. Just nobody needs that. Okay, but if you do have a question or something to say, I will mention your comments if you're chatting. I'll say hello. I'll use your username as well, so keep that in mind if you want to maintain some privacy. I'm not a judgmental person. I love all the humans in the world, and I try to give information that everybody can use. So if you have a question or a comment that you want to ask privately, or a more in-depth question, you can always email positivepusslive@gmail.com. I'm very good at responding and just listening. If that's all you want from me, I'll try to help you. So if you want to stay up to date with my videos, you can subscribe to my YouTube, Positive Pussy, or follow me on Twitter @PositivePuss, and definitely check out my website, positivepussy.live. It's in the description of the video for all the amazing links to the awesome resources that I find for everybody and for the videos. So last week we discovered that BDSM covers 3 different relationships, or it stands for 3 different things: bondage and discipline, dominance and submission, and sadism and masochism. These relationships aren't mutually exclusive, and usually BDSM practitioners participate in a little bit of all 3. I know I definitely do. The expressions of these relationships, however, can be endless. Last week I mentioned the website BDSMtest.org, which can give you a good idea of what your BDSM expression is. If you took it, you can see how you compare to me when I tell you my scores later. But this website defines some of the different BDSM archetypes. And this has become kind of a slogan for me, but it's important to remember that everything is a spectrum. And just like everything, some people are really into BDSM and really fit these archetypes, and some people are only sort of into types. So if you're not 100% one thing or another, it's totally fine. You can be a little bit of everything if you want. Like, you know, it's whatever you want. BDSMtest.org also uses the term archetype. I sometimes use the word expression. There's no official term for this, but just for consistency purposes, I'll try to keep saying archetype. But it's just basically however you prefer to participate in dominance or submission or topping or bottoming. And this website also pointed out a correction I need to make. So last week I said tops and bottoms are interchangeable. However, this website describes the dominant, and it describes the dominant as just the person who is in charge, and it actually distinguishes it from a top, which is someone who is giving pain, degradation, or bondage. And the dominant is just the one who is making the rules, so they don't have to be dishing out any pain, degradation, or bondage to be the dominant. So there could be a situation where there is a dominant and a submissive, where the dominant is in charge and calling the shots and ordering the submissive around, but the submissive is a little bit bratty and a sadist, and the dom is a brat tamer and a masochist, which means the sadist is they like to give pain, and the masochist means they like to receive pain. And in this situation, the dom could maybe order the sub to suck their dick or their strap-on, whatever the case may be, and the brat says okay, but instead bites the dom or slaps them, and then the dom could punish the sub in whatever way they want. And the dom could take pleasure away or postpone it and threaten no sex, or make the sub or tie the sub up and make the sub do this act. And of course, if the sub uses the safe word, the scene would end and there would no longer be these roles of dom and sub or top and bottom. But my point is, before I basically gave you guys a cute little BDSM situation, top and bottom, they're not interchangeable. Or sorry, top and dom are not interchangeable. A top doesn't have to be a dom or a sub. A dom doesn't have to be a top. A dom is just someone who is calling the shots and making the rules. So the person who is in charge, deciding the consequences, deciding the rules, ordering the sub around. And some doms like resistance, and some doms like compliance. The submissive is the one who is following the orders and the rules of the dom. Sorry. I have a choker on, so I'm choking a little bit, but it's okay. I have some water. We're good. I do like to be choked slightly, so it's fine. Okay. So some subs like to follow the orders exactly and are very compliant, and some subs like to resist and be forced to relinquish control, obviously with the consent given to the dom to do so before the scene in the negotiation. And if you don't know what that is, you should watch part 1 because I could do a very in-depth vocabulary lesson. But I did cover all that last week, so I just wanted to make that clarification between the doms and the tops. But yeah, the tops and doms, they don't have to be interchangeable, and they don't have to be mutually exclusive or inclusive. And within the realm of BDSM, there are so many different types of doms and tops and subs and bottoms. And these are the archetypes that I'm going to talk about. So the first one that this website goes into, and I kind of went in order with the website, and I pulled from other resources and personal experiences as well. So yeah. Let's get into it. So a rigger is someone who's into bondage with chains, ropes, handcuffs, etc. And like I said last week, it doesn't necessarily have to be sexual. I've watched a rope scene that was really sexy, beautiful, and connected, and the rigger did not have sex with the women that he tied up. He just got pleasure from the art of it, from the act of it. And so it's possible for it to not be sexual, but obviously sometimes it is. And since some riggers are also doms, some like the sub to resist the restraint and some don't. The counterpart to the rigger is the rope bunny. And the rope bunny likes to submit to the rigger and enjoys being restrained or tied up. And they may not necessarily play an eager bunny, but if you enjoy being fucked with some handcuffs on, there's probably a little bit of rope bunny in you. The next one is a master or mistress. Mistresses are also sometimes called femdoms. And this type of dom takes complete control over the sub. The sub is their consensual slave. If you've ever heard the term sissy maid, this is a male submissive who is being sissified or feminized by their femdom or mistress. And this can include costumes, humiliations, or sexual acts, but it doesn't have to. It can simply be making the sub perform traditional and outdated female roles like cooking dinner or doing the dishes / laundry. And control by the master or mistress in these situations lasts throughout the scene. And this website says specifically that masters are 24/7, but it also says except for in the negotiated situations, like work or something. And if, you don't want to do it 24/7, you can just negotiate the exception where it's whenever you guys are not alone together, then you're not in a scene. Or if you're not in a specific room, like your bedroom or maybe a set aside dungeon, which would be so cool, or a dungeon, then you're not in the scene. Or if you're out of the house, then you're not in the scene. You can negotiate whatever it is, but the master or mistress has complete control over their slave and their lives and their aspects whenever they are in the scene. And there are also degraders and degradees. The degrader likes to degrade, and this can be with words. Calling someone a dirty little slut is a light form of degradation. It can also be with actions like stepping on someone or peeing on someone, whatever the person's kink is. And those things don't have to be included in degradation. They also don't have to be degrading. It just depends on what you're doing with it. And if that's what the people in the scene want it to be like, then more power to them. I hope they're having a lot of fun. I know some people are really into that. The degradee likes to receive degradation. And I personally love being called a dirty little slut, but I also love being called a good little kitten. So, you know, it's possible to be into degradation a little bit and still like to be praised like the good kitten you are. There is also, I guess, speaking of kittens, there is also owner and pet, which I think, a very light form of. But the dominant in this situation plays the role of owner. Similar to the master or mistress, they have complete control over their sub. However, the sub in this situation, instead of playing a slave role, they play more of a pet role. Sorry, I gotta drink some water. It's so hot, you guys. And talking about sex just makes it even hotter, right? Anyway, so the sub in this situation is more of like a pet, more playful, more curious, and sometimes, but not always, the pet will have a cage, eat from a bowl, and have a collar like mine. I'm not wearing my real collar right now, but you know, I have a choker on, and do more pet-like things like be very playful. And they're possibly slightly less eager to serve and more eager to receive. So I would say like a pet versus a slave. And this isn't exact science, everybody. It's just like things that I've noticed and seen and patterns. So I would say like pets are more eager to play and receive some pleasure, while slaves are more eager to serve and give pleasure and stuff like that. So that's kind of the difference, but it depends on the person, obviously, and some pets really like to please their owners. So, you know, it is what it is. And people who are owners and pets are also sometimes people with fur fetishes. I don't have a fur fetish, but I also don't dislike fur. It's super soft, and I imagine that fucking on fur would be super nice. And I also do want one of those tail butt plug things, so I guess I have a little bit of a fur thing. But not all people who are furries, which are people with a fur fetish, participate in the owner and pet BDSM dynamic, and not everyone with the owner and pet BDSM dynamic have a fur fetish. So occasionally people do dress up or fully dedicate to their pet BDSM roles. And honestly, that sounds really fun. I think I would like to do that one day. Probably because I'm not a puppy or like a dog, and I'm more of a cat person, and I feel like being a cat would be so fun and easy. But it's whatever you're into. Not everyone obviously dresses up, and I just do a very light form. I just kind of have the name and stuff. But we also do it a little bit in our verbal exchanges and stuff like that. So it just really depends on what you're into and what your partner is willing to do with you. Next, we have the brat tamer and the brat. Nick last week is a self-proclaimed brat tamer. And brats are basically the subs who like to resist or fight back and break rules. And while I am a good kitten, there is a little bit of brattiness in me and in all of us, in my opinion. And the brat tamer is a dom who likes to have some of that resistance and tame the brat. Figure. Brat tamers find the resistance as a sort of playfulness, and they also like to assert themselves, and the sub likes to be forced into the submission. This might be sometimes the dynamic that's at play in some rape fantasies, and people who have sexual trauma oftentimes are into this because it helps them to recreate the situation where they have the control, because the sub really does have the control in the situation if they're with a dom who is trustworthy and practicing BDSM safely, sanely, and consensually. Consent is super important, especially in these kinds of situations where you're resisting. And I cannot stress it enough that consent is so important. This is a situation where a safe word would be useful. And it's basically in any situation where there's consensual non-consent, you should probably be using a safe word. Or I would suggest, it's highly recommended you use a safe word. I'm not going to should you, but yeah. Okay, so the next dynamic is the primal hunter and the primal prey. Primal is just a reference to being into the sexual animal instincts taking control. They also like raw emotions and loud, unfiltered sounds, growling, roaring. I don't know if roaring is a word, but you know, growling and gurring, and those are just onomatopoeias. Okay, and the prey is trying to get away from the hunter, so they're resisting. And since it's primal, they're using their animal instincts to resist, like clawing, biting, screaming, whatever the case is. And from what I know, the hunter and the prey is also the dynamic at play for abduction fantasies, and it may or may not be primal, but it sounds really hot. The abduction fantasy is something I would totally want to do a scene about, because if you're like me and you saw Taken and you knew it was absolutely horrible, but for some reason your pussy was tingling and you thought you were a horrible person, just imagine if that movie, she just consented to being abducted and they set it all up, and in the end she was let go and she just had an awesome BDS scene in the middle. It would have been a lot happier, in my opinion. Okay, so the next dynamic I want to talk about is the daddy mommy dominant and the boy or girl submissive. It's close to my heart because I have a daddy dom, and I guess technically he's like an owner, but because I'm his kitten. But we don't do any other pet play except for the name for the most part. So, and like I said, our verbal exchanges sometimes. But he's definitely a daddy. He fits this archetype. This kind of dom is a nurturing dominant, and they usually do more verbal dominance than physical dominance. But a daddy dom can also be a brat tamer. So in that case, there would be some physical dominance, but it's more about the dynamic between the sub and the dom. And usually the sub in this dynamic has a childlike submission, and naughty sexual curiosity. And sometimes doms and subs in this dynamic engage in age play as well. And age play is a kink for playing an age older or younger than yourself, and it's usually much older or younger than yourself. It depends. But I don't exactly do any age play. However, I do just have a lot of childlike innocence in my personality, and some childlike mannerisms. And one thing I find interesting in other relationships is that baby talk is super common. Even in relationships where they don't participate in BDSM stuff, they have no idea that they probably have some age play kinks hidden in there that they could be having a lot of fun with. When I was a freshman in college, one of my roommates had a boyfriend, and they constantly talked in baby talk to each other. And I was just like, just stop for 1 second. Like, go have fun in private. But yeah, that's what happens when you're in college and you have 2 other roommates. But yeah, some people take this kink really far and dress up and like to play a very young child or even an infant with costumes and everything. And some people just do baby talk without even knowing it's a thing, which is why knowing about all of these different things can actually be helpful in exploring your own sexuality. So the daddy or mommy, the master or the mistress, the owners or the hunters, are all just different types of dominance that play with the power dynamic over their subs in different ways. And the subs in these relationships, the boys and the girls, the slaves, the pets, or the prey, they all give the doms power in different ways. So they release the power in different ways, and there's always like different rules with the different dynamics. And it varies from person to person and from kinkster to kinkster. And sadism and masochism can be involved within the dynamic or not, but it often is. And same goes for the bondage and discipline and sexual intercourse. Lots of BDSM scenes go from start to finish without any sexual activity, and some also incorporate intercourse into the scene. Also, in my Freaky Friday episode, I talked about kinks. Sorry, my foot is so asleep. I gotta put it over here. I sit on the floor. So yeah, in my Freaky Friday episode, I talked about kinks as well as BDSM. And kinks and fetishes are oftentimes involved with BDSM, like leather kinks, latex kinks, fur kinks, age play kinks, and they're usually worked into the dynamic, but they're not necessarily, they don't have to be, and it just depends on the person and the kink or the fetish. So if you took the BDSM quiz, you will know which one of these archetypes you fit best into, or what percentage rope bunny or mistress you are. I took the test as well, and my top 10 results. So my results, the first one was I'm 100% submissive. I'm 100% a rope bunny and 100% non-monogamous, which I don't know why non-monogamous is one of them. That's not really, but yeah, I guess, okay. But we all knew that about me. I have 2 videos on polyamory. And so the next one was I'm 96% girl, which is the, I have a daddy. 93% age player, which I guess, I mean, there's nothing wrong with it, of course. I've just like never identified with that at all because I don't necessarily like really play that much younger. I'm just myself. I'm just a baby as a person, you know? Yeah, so I'm 93% age player, 93% masochist, which means I like to receive pain, and that's very true. And I would say even like, well, I guess not 100%. I don't want to be cut or anything, but 79% slave, 75% primal prey, 75% pet, and 74% experimentalist. Yeah, I'm up for anything. No, I do like to try new things and experiment with new stuff because, like, you know, how do you know if you don't like it if you don't try it? And some things I have tried, like electricity play, and although it was fun to try and it was really interesting, I wasn't that into it. So, you know, you try things out and you don't like them and you figure that out. So you can see how your scores compare to mine. Just remember, this is literally one website with some defined archetypes or expressions of BDSM, and it's whatever you like to do, that's what you should do. Or that's what I suggest that you do. I've been using a lot of shit. I'm so sorry. If you did take the test and you found out, to your surprise or not, that you are kinky, here are some tips if you're thinking about trying it with a partner. Number 1, talk. BDSM is all about consent. So if you're trying something with a partner, definitely you have to talk about it first. Find someone that you trust, because you might feel silly at first. You might have always, or, you know, you might just like have been born to play a BDSM archetype. Regardless, it's important to have trust with the person that you're doing, especially if you're trying some consensual, non-consent stuff. But if you don't have a partner, try to confide in a friend and ask them to attend a munch with you. And if you don't remember what a munch is from last week's episode, or you didn't watch it, which you should, or I think you should, you know, you should watch it. Yeah, so if you don't remember what a munch is, it's just a public meetup for BDSM community members to not to play, just to socialize. So yeah, if you don't have a partner or like you don't really know what to do, I suggest just like confiding in a friend, your most sexual friend, which would be me for a lot of people, and just ask them to go to a munch with you, because it's not going to be sexual or anything, or like look up some events, some like dungeons or something that are having events, and that would be really cool actually to take someone to, even if they're not into it, just for them to see and be educated about it, right? So number 2, explore, do research, listen to podcasts, however it is that you absorb information. Definitely do that and try to find out what ideas turn you on and what roles you think you'd like to try or you think you fit into. Number 3, know your boundaries and know what you want, because you should know what you want and you should definitely know what you don't want. Practice being honest about the things that you like and about the things that you don't want to do. And if you're trying to get into a community, definitely make sure you practice that and know your boundaries, because it can be really hard to define your boundaries once you're there. You can get all swept up in the ecstasy of all of it. And you'll be respected more and you'll respect yourself more if you have the courage to speak up and say no if you really don't want to do something. Also, 4, I numbered these, I don't know why. 4, go slow and make sure you have consent. Again, consent. But take little baby steps, try little things one at a time, and get consent along the way. And come up with a safe word, even if it's just for fun, even if you don't intend on practicing consensual non-consent. Safe words are just fun to have, I don't know. And yeah, it can be your first step, is just like coming up with a safe word with your partner. And once you start getting into it and you're doing it, or you're doing scenes, just make sure there's consent again, and always have a way for the sub to get out of the scene, whether it's a safe word or consent that a no will be respected. And if you really get into it, number 5, practice, because or before you try something new, or if you're increasing the risk of anything, practice first. And like, I mean, like if you're doing ropes or something, like maybe practice on a teddy bear. But if you're doing something even more risky than you think you can handle, definitely try finding a community or getting trained and seeing if you can learn what you're doing. And just make sure during the scene, you're always keeping that communication open, making sure that you're not hurting anybody or you're hurting your partner. Like really hurting them, you know? If you're looking for a community, findamunch.com can help you find a munch in your area to help you meet some other kinksters in a public social setting. And you can also always try FetLife to meet people online. Just obviously, I shouldn't have to say this, but do it in a public place if you're meeting somebody for the first time, and be smart and be safe. Okay, I think I'm in the clear for that one. To reiterate again from last week, I don't want anyone to think that I'm shitting on vanilla sex. While it has been a while since I've had some really vanilla sex, that doesn't mean that I don't ever have it, and that doesn't mean that there is anything wrong with vanilla sex. And just because you do enjoy vanilla sex like I do on occasion doesn't mean that you can't also love BDSM and enjoy that every now and then on occasion. Humans are amazing, and we all have different sexual tastes, and that's what I love about us. So, resource time. We're finally at the end, and I'm going to be posting a lot more resources on the website, so it might take a little bit for me to get it up, and I usually do it like so late. I apologize. I'm going to try to be on top of it because I do end up posting a lot more resources on the website than I mentioned here. But if you follow me on Twitter at @PositivePuss, I will always post once the video is up on the website with all the resources, but I'll say a few for you guys right now. And I don't know if I mentioned this one last week, but this book has been recommended to me multiple times because I'm 100% rope bunny. But it's called The Seductive Art of Japanese Bondage by Midori. And apparently it's a great book. I also found a PDF from a sex educator and rigger from Minneapolis. And you can check out his website called kinkfriendly.org. And if you go to like the classes tab, there's a list of PDFs and you can download them, and it's just like informational pamphlets that he has handed out. And the one that I'm going to post is called Rope Bondage 101. So look out for that one. And if you're a little or a daddy or a mommy, there is a website called Little's Munch. And you can find other littles or daddy mommy doms. And a munch is just for meet up and socialize, not for playing. So it would just be to meet others. And if you're a furry, which isn't in itself necessarily BDSM, but it often incorporates some BDSM, so I figured I would just mention it. There's a website called furscience.com, and it's really informative, and it was super interesting to explore. I kind of got lost in it a little bit last night. But I've also been recommended a book called The New Topping Book and The New Bottoming Book, both by Dossie Easton and Janet W. Hardy. Apparently they're really good at explaining just like the roles of the bottom and the top and all of that stuff. And then last week, The Loving Dominant by John Warren and his lovely wife in some kinky outfit in the back of the book was recommended last week by Nick. And if I've been reading a little bit of it, so it's not just for doms. There's also subs too. I mean, reading, I really mean like I looked through it a little bit. He just gave it to me like yesterday, a few hours ago. Yeah, so all of these resources are just guidelines. So if you do end up reading them, just make sure you remember that you don't have to fit into any defined version of BDSM. No one can tell you what's going to be right for you. But that's the fun part, figuring it out and exploring. So I hope all of you pussies go explore this week and get your sex on, whatever kind of sex you like to have. Just be safe, be sane, and consensual. All right, pussies, I will see you next week for a video on sex and culture. Ooh. Yeah, it should be fun. But bye for meow, because I am me out of here.